Greetings and welcome back to my regular listeners and a first-time welcome to those who are new to this podcast. I'm Pam Christian, the researcher, producer, writer, and host for this weekly podcast where I explore current events from a biblical and prophetic perspective so we, as God's children, can know how He wants us to respond. For over 4 years, I have spent every day researching to know what is true and what is not, what is conspiracy theory and what is conspiracy fact. In the face of pastors and Christian leaders continuing to teach us about church history, about the tenets of the Christian faith, and how to live a godly life in Christ without so much as even mentioning the blatant evil all around us and how to stand up against it, without teaching us how to draw on the power and the authority we have in Christ, as the Bible says, against all the schemes of the enemy, without talking about real-world evil efforts that have been underway, especially since 2020, to literally take us out, means today's podcast is taking a drastic turn. I woke very early this morning, about 4:30. I generally have my podcast written by the end of Monday to record on Tuesday for upload early Wednesday morning. But this week, with the aftermath of Hurricane Helene and the truth about how the magnitude of death and destruction actually happened and continues to happen, with the expectation of Hurricane Milton, I cannot allow my fellow Christians and Christian pastors and leaders to continue in their willful ignorance and disconnect with what is truly going on in our world. Yes, I know about the Johnson Act here in America. Yes, I know how this man-made legal ruling has muzzled pastors and Christian leaders from instructing people to help them know how to navigate in this world where evil has progressed to the greatest extent the world has ever known. I can see how the deceptive laws of man have influenced and molded pastors and Christian leaders to the point that they are actually doing the devil's bidding to keep Christians ignorant, disengaged, and impotent against the enemy's agenda. I see clearly, and I challenge everyone in the sound of my voice to understand the church has failed. Christians have failed. We have all of Christ's authority and power over all the schemes of the enemy. We have every weapon needed to come against the enemy, but we lack the skill and training on how to use what Christ died to give us so that we can live in the freedom and victory He died to provide us. Can you imagine how Jesus feels? He went through everything He did to completely release us from the powers of evil, and we have drifted back into an understanding and a response to evil that makes us impotent, that has actually allowed us to become tools of the enemy. Having learned all I have these past 4+ years, having learned of the intentional deception and lies we've been living under, especially in light of everything I've learned about Hurricane Helene and what could occur with Hurricane Milton, I'm essentially screaming from the highest mountain I have access to, and I'm begging you to let what you hear today radically transform you. We have been conformed to the patterns of the world. Is it any wonder that we're suffering as we are today? Today must be the day we wake up and take our rightful place as Christ's ecclesia in this world and stop complying with what governments of the world have imposed upon us. The governments and laws of the world are secondary to God's government and laws. And with the world operating in total lawlessness, with the world attempting to enforce laws that are contrary to God's laws, we must do what is right in the sight of God and not man. Through proven prophets, God has told us the enemy, Satan, is working through people who reject God. These people want all power and authority over all the people of the world. And to achieve their goals, they have been taking out great numbers of people in the world to reduce and reconstruct the population to a more manageable populace. In addition to radically constricting policies and laws, economic controls, indoctrination through education, media, drugs and pharmaceuticals, psychological warfare, they use controlled genocide through abortion, wars, pandemics, and turning our food and water supplies and nature itself into weapons against the masses. The people who are most threatening to evil's agenda are those who are committed Christians, who believe in God and Christ's authority and power. They are those who do not bow at their evil plans and goals, and these are the people the enemy is working hardest to remove from this earth. Nominal Christians are not a threat. In fact, they help the enemy advance his plans. People ignorant about spiritual matters, they're not a threat. They, too, help the enemy advance his plans. The ones who are most threatening to the enemy's efforts are those who are armed with the truth, who are confident in the work of Jesus Christ, who have chosen to partner with God to do what it takes to see his kingdom will done on earth as it is in heaven. As God said, those who are not for him are against him. So before you hear anything else today, let me ask you, who are you for? And how are you demonstrating your commitment? As God also said in the Bible, faith without works is dead. Your first order of business in these days, when God has been revealing every manner of corruption and evil wherever it exists, as overwhelming and incomprehensible as it may be, you must face reality. We cannot afford to be willfully ignorant a single day longer. We cannot afford to stay in our holy huddles, attempting to create lives of our preference by ignoring and not talking about reality. We are living at the height of the spiritual battle God has been exposing to us, especially since 2020. Today, thanks only to God, the enemy is in a panic and is trying to do everything possible on multiple fronts all at the same time in desperate effort to achieve their goals of complete world dominance and control. The enemy includes self-appointed elite who make up the establishment here in the United States and similar bad actors in other governments, and they are working in tandem with those who seek a one-world government. At this point in time, they are in utter chaos. For this reason, they are doing everything they can to put us in chaos, to push us to our limits, and cause civil war. God has reassured us in great measure that our victory is certain, and I know that is true. What I sincerely and deeply wish wasn't true was the real-world devastation, with people losing so very much, as we've recently seen with Hurricane Helene in the United States, the devastation in the Middle East because of evil terrorists and radical Muslims, and the war between Ukraine and Russia, and so much more. With this week's podcast, I must report some of the greatest devastation, destruction, and losses through intentional evil that I've ever had to report before, making this an exceedingly difficult episode. However, and very important for us who remain alive at this time in the earth's history, we must recognize the long arm of the Lord, God Almighty, who is showing up to avenge his people and very soon will bring recompense for all the enemy has done. I assure you, as we see God dealing with the enemy, we will see even more devastation and loss as unrepentant evil people are subjected to God's wrath. It will not be easy to see, but because it means justice is served, it will be sweet. And don't think for a second that God won't cause the enemy to pay back with interest. Also, according to God's promises, expect God to restore all the years the locust has eaten. God told us prophetically to expect Red October to come early this time, and it would be red hot. Here we are on October 9th when this episode first posts, and what is happening in the world is like never before. Even so, understand this is not the time for the enemy to have victory as we read about in the book of Revelation. It is the time for God's people to rise up out of our comatose stupor and see the truth that has been undetected for decades and partner with God to take back what is rightfully ours. First, I will highlight the tremendous importance of the specific calendar dates we are in. Then I will share vital details about Hurricane Helene and its aftermath and the application for Hurricane Milton, and hopefully what you learn from me and from what others are explaining. We will have many more people finally awaken to the truth. There are far more of us than there are the enemy combatants, and with God on our side, we will take back what the enemy has stolen and experience the victory God has secured for us. I won't have time to update events in the Middle East or the Russia-Ukraine conflict, but I hope you finally realize all of these unprecedented destructive events are interrelated to the United States presidential election and the evil efforts for a one-world government. In the end, I will provide the reasons we must remain hopeful and fully engaged with what God is doing in order to experience God's promised victory. God is the only solution to all that's going on in the world. So, if you've been searching for ways to make sense out of everything that's happening worldwide, and if you need solid reasons to bolster your hope for victory, stay with me to the end. Perseverance is what's needed to finish strong, and I am committed to do everything I can to invest in you many certain and confident reasons not to give in or give up. And I hope and I pray all pastors and Christian leaders who hear this podcast will step up to the raging battle we are clearly in and start speaking to world events to arm, encourage, and give hope to their congregations. This episode will first post on October 9th, 2024. This is in the middle of the 10 days of awe that span between Rosh Hashanah, which was October 2nd, and ends with Yom Kippur, October 12th, 2024. These holidays are considered high holy days that are to be most reverently regarded, with understanding that these are the days for annual judgment for God's people. During the 10 days leading up to Yom Kippur, which is the Day of Atonement, God's people are to seek the Lord to learn what is within them that is not holy, that would prevent them from advancing or being promoted on the Day of Atonement. Traditionally, the understanding of these days is God's court is in session, with his people coming before him, both individually and as a nation, when God will proclaim his judgment on the Day of Atonement. My regular listeners will recall I've often reminded us God's judgment begins with the house of the Lord, with God's people, according to 1 Peter 4:17. I firmly believe this is the time we are experiencing now, in the greatest way ever in the history of the world. Pastors and Christian leaders, hear God and take note how you can and must address world events with your people. I've shared before that I believe the time we're living since March 2020, when COVID-19 was released, is not the end of the end times, but a forerunner to show us that events foretold in the book of Revelation of Jesus Christ and elsewhere concerning end times will indeed happen. It's not figurative, but a literal explanation of the culmination of the history of humanity and the earth and good and evil. When we step back to view events with the Hebrew calendar, it is uncanny how world events always escalate at the times of the spring high holy days that occur in March and April, and the fall high holy days that take place in September, October. The final end-time Great Tribulation is revealed to span over a period of 7 years, with the first 3.5 years being different from the second 3.5 years. If I'm correct about this time being a forerunner to the Great Tribulation, calculating the first 3.5 years from March 2020 brings us to September 2023, which is the month of the fall high holy days that particular year. I ask you to think back to events from March 2020 to events through September 2023 in your nation as I share an overview of what has been experienced in the United States. Along with the world, we suffered everything we did under COVID-19 in 2020, followed by Joe Biden being sworn into office after what the vast majority of people now know was a stolen election, followed by a so-called insurrection that the radical left has tried to pin on Donald Trump. And the Biden administration immediately began work to fundamentally change America in effort to achieve a one-world government, with the most devastating actions being the utterly atrocious withdrawal from Afghanistan and the treasonous opening of our borders. Why did Biden do all that in his first year? Because proponents of a one-world order had planned their control by the year 2021. We know this because of the publication the United Nations produced titled Agenda 2021. However, seeing they were not as far along in their plans, they adjusted their goals and published Agenda 2030. In February 2022, the Biden administration openly became supportive of the Ukraine-Russia conflict. During this first 3.5-year time, the United Nations and the World Health Organization and other institutions worked in tandem to destroy the United States and Israel as the two main nations that stand in their way. The second 3.5 years of the total 7 years run from October 2023 through March 2027. What happened in October 2023? Hamas invaded Israel to start yet another war that has greatly intensified and includes several other nations at this point in time. During the second 3.5 years, we have the most critical presidential election in the United States planned for November 2024, which is a major significant event for the establishment and those working for a one-world government. Given the timelines, you can see the November 2024 election is critical for the entire world. Depending upon what happens over the next 30 days or so, we will either have a one-world government or a God-led show of strength that utterly and miraculously overcomes evil in a manner the whole world will have to acknowledge was God and God alone. I firmly believe God is going to do what he said he will do, and any and everyone who is willfully aligned with him through faith in Jesus will see the power of the Holy Spirit overcome evil before our very eyes, and the world will be set free from evil in ways it has never known before. We are on the precipice of a time when the whole earth is filled with the knowledge of God as the waters cover the sea. If my calculations of the 3.5-year periods are correct, by April 2027, long before the year 2030, the world will be radically transformed by God. If my discerning the times is correct, soon after the November 2024 election, we will be operating from a place of victory over our enemy in partnership with God in the cleanup operation leading to spring of 2027, when we will celebrate Passover as never before. About Hurricane Helene. There is so very much more truth to be revealed, but for me, there is enough evidence to already convince me this devastating hurricane was not entirely natural, but an engineered event by the evil cabal seeking a one-world government, knowing they needed to destroy America if their plans are to succeed. The crimes against humanity they've done long before September 2024 are now exponentially increased before God, who has promised to avenge his people. We know Hurricane Helene was a Category 4 hurricane, while as of 3:46 p.m. Pacific Time on October 7th, 2024, Hurricane Milton was registered at a Category 5. Then on Tuesday morning, it was reduced to a Category 4. It could change again before its expected landfall in Florida on Wednesday, October 9th, the day this podcast first posts. What I've learned about Hurricane Helene must be considered with Hurricane Milton. The first thing that struck me with Hurricane Helene is how far inland it went. I'd always known hurricanes to be more coastal. When searching how far do hurricanes travel inland, I read hurricanes have the potential to travel up to 100 to 200 miles inland. Although some storms lose steam as they move inland because they can no longer draw upon the heat from the ocean, these systems can still unleash torrential rains, causing unprecedented flooding into inland communities. The fact Hurricane Helene traveled 500 miles inland makes it very unusual. Add to that fact that Tennessee was impacted, and it's even more unusual. I repeatedly read when hurricane systems move inland, it loses its engine, its source of strength, which is warm water, so it rapidly weakens. We know Hurricane Helene was a Category 4 when it hit Florida, and it was a Category 2 by the time it hit Georgia. It then weakened into a tropical storm as it moved toward the Carolinas that heaped heavy rain into the mountain communities. The entire ordeal is unimaginable and utterly tragic. The Washington Post headlines read, "Helene has become one of the deadliest hurricanes of the modern era," noting it was far worse than Hurricane Katrina. However, based on eyewitnesses, the devastation and deaths, the Washington Post and mainstream media are reporting are woefully underreported, and the number of deaths instead of 200 should be expected well over 2,000, possibly 3,000, when the truth is finally revealed. Deeply disturbing calls for help have been sent over the internet, reporting bodies floating in the waters, body parts found in trees, the stench from decomposing bodies and the lack of search and rescue, and citizens who are trying to help neighbors being told they will be arrested for interfering. I put links to a couple of these reports in the show notes. Clearly, matters in North Carolina are far worse than the illegitimate government allows the media to publish. To learn more about hurricanes, I went to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, and hurricanes.gov, and I read an article titled 70th Anniversary of the First Hurricane Seeding Experiment. It explained weather experimentation under General Electric Laboratories' agreement with the Naval Research Laboratory and Army Signal Corps, dubbed Project Cirrus. In 1947, one experiment using cloud seeding with dry ice resulted in Hurricane King actually strengthening and changing direction from what they expected. The hurricane struck Savannah, Georgia, and South Carolina. The public was outraged that the scientists caused the storm to swerve, and the threats of lawsuits followed. Dr. Irving Langmuir, head of GE Laboratories, issued a statement that he was 99% sure the storm had changed due to the seeding. Dr. Langmuir's claim was quickly dispelled by Chief of the Weather Bureau Dr. Francis Reichelderfer, and the case was published demonstrating hurricanes could swerve without scientists seeding it, and the threats and lawsuits eventually evaporated. For many years after, no scientist dared mention weather modification and hurricane in the same sentence. 11 years later, the National Hurricane Research Project carried out very modest seeding equipment tests in hurricanes, but kept things on the down low until they were sure the storm wasn't going to pull a swerve on them. It wasn't until 1962 that the United States Weather Bureau and Department of Defense reached a formal agreement to carry out Project Storm Fury and attempted to seed hurricanes again. It's highly possible that the government needed to maintain public support of the prospect of weather manipulation, and the matter was published, meaning the media was used to corral public opinion. Just a thought. We have been learning about real efforts by self-appointed elite to take control of the world. In my opinion, the whole fear-mongering under the guise of climate change is a scheme of the enemy to gain control over the masses. With that in mind, listen to a portion of a speech made by President Lyndon Johnson in 1962 before the graduating class of the Southwest Texas State University.
For new frontiers, new visions. It calls for us taking the steps now that will make us no longer second in space and in science. It lays the predicate and the foundation for a space communication satellite that will permit the people of the world to see one television program at the same time throughout the world. Think about that kind of communication, and think about the opportunity that will provide. It lays the predicate and the foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world. It lays the predicate for the steps that are necessary to send a man to the moon.
President LBJ clearly stated, "He who controls the weather controls the world." Keep that in mind as I share about another article published in 1997 I learned about titled "Weather as a Force Multiplier, Owning the Weather in 2025." This is a research paper presented to Air Force 2025. The executive summary reads in part, quote, "In 2025, the United States Aerospace Forces can own the weather by capitalizing on emerging technologies and focusing on development of those technologies to war-fighting applications. Such capabilities offers the war fighter tools to shape the battle space in ways never before possible. It provides opportunities to impact operations across the full spectrum of conflict and is pertinent to all possible futures. The purpose of this paper is to outline a strategy for the use of a future weather modification system to achieve military objectives rather than to provide a detailed roadmap." Beginning with 2020, we've had many reasons to believe our own government is working against we the people. So I ask you to keep all of this in mind as I now share 2 patents that are publicly known specific to weather modification. There is the United States Patent number 2003-0085296 by Waxmansky for a hurricane and tornado control device filed on November 2nd, 2001. This device allows control of the speed and direction of hurricanes and tornadoes. There is also United States Patent 2013-017-5352 by Burns for a method to influence the direction of travel of hurricanes, filed on January 7th, 2012. These are just 2 public files. Imagine all the classified documents with the military-industrial complex. If you want to actually see the patents I mentioned, you can go to the United States Patent Office website and do a basic public search by patent number, or you can visit my Beyond the Podcast page and see them there. At this point, I want to give special mention to Seth Householder, host of Man in America, for helping me know about the ongoing weather manipulation efforts with these patents. Now I ask you to keep everything I've shared so far in mind as I highlight the known plans to mine both quartz and lithium from North Carolina that people in the towns of North Carolina didn't want because it would radically change their towns, their way of life, and their future plans. Jonathan Bolt, a resident who lives less than a mile from the mine, wanted to know the impact on the community. He said, quote, "I just want to understand what they're doing and how they're doing it. They've bought up nearly every property we grew up with. The furniture store, the church, and now the drive-in. They're taking over the town. How do we benefit?" On September 12, 2023, the United States Department of Defense issued a press release that was published titled, "The Department of Defense enters agreement to expand domestic lithium mining for United States battery supply chains." It explains how the United States entered an agreement with Albemarle Corporation to expand domestic mining of lithium. It reads, quote, "The $90 million agreement entered into under the Defense Production Act, Title III, Authorities and Utilizing Funds Appropriated by the Inflation Reduction Act, will help support Albemarle's planned reopening of their Kings Mountain, North Carolina lithium mine to be operational between 2025 and 2030. We've all heard reports how FEMA has stated they are out of money to help the victims of Hurricane Helene. Vice President Kamala Harris woefully insulted the people, stating they would be granted $750, explaining they need to simply go online to apply. Online? They have no power, no water, no food, no shelter. Even the Starlink Elon Musk provided was quickly shut down because the rogue government didn't want pictures of the actual damage of the area and body carnage to make it to the internet. Hurricane Helene hit ground on September 26th in Florida and continued up through Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, and Tennessee. Helene continued to linger across the southeast for several days before heading to the northeast on September 30th. Here we are on October 9th, and there is still no proper search and rescue or humanitarian relief. General Michael Flynn spoke on October 5th about just how useless FEMA is under this present administration, clearly stating FEMA should have been on the scene long before that date. He knows the area and stated we should expect the death toll to be in the thousands. I encourage you to use the link in the show notes and pay careful attention to the details General Flynn provides. Glenn Beck also exposed how useless FEMA is in Asheville, North Carolina. First, he discovered that the FEMA crew was stationed off the main road, making them hard to find. Next, FEMA admitted, "We got here yesterday, a full week late." Then a FEMA crew member told Beck that they have a great app, but nobody has internet in the area. Beck asked how victims are supposed to find FEMA's location, and they replied, "That would be the news media's job. The thing is, nobody has functioning televisions." Then FEMA urged residents to listen to the radio in their cars for updates, the same cars that were washed away from the flood. One crew member told Beck, "We actually go door to door." Beck then asked, "When will that start?" The crew member replied, "That's way above my head. Do you want to talk with my crew lead?" Finally, the crew leader comes over and admits to Beck, "We don't necessarily go door to door." What doors are there to go to? The buildings, the homes were washed away. After a SpaceX engineer helping on the ground in North Carolina wrote to Musk, Elon posted, quote, "The big issue is FEMA is actively blocking shipments and seizing goods and services locally and locking them away to state they are on their own. It's very real and scary how much they have taken control to stop people helping." End quote. My heart, along with every other caring heart, is beyond broken at what the precious men, women, and children have suffered and continue to suffer. On October 3rd, Alejandro Mayorkas stated the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, does not have enough funds to make it through the hurricane season. This news came after FEMA spent hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars on migrants due to border czar Kamala Harris's open border, instead of funding for Americans impacted by disasters. In the fiscal year 2024, FEMA allocated $640.9 million to migrant relief. Some reports indicate up to $1 billion has been spent by the Department of Homeland Security on illegal migrants. But Mayorkas says these funds cannot be spent on hurricane relief since they were allocated to state and local governments with an influx of illegal migrants. FEMA may not have the funds, but there is plenty of money that can and should be reallocated from other sources, as General Michael Flynn explained. With over 614 major disaster declarations still open, some dating back nearly 2 decades, the agency's decision to prioritize illegal immigration over American disaster victims has people furious. FEMA estimates that it will fall $7 billion short of the funds needed to manage new disasters thanks to reckless financial decisions. So far this year, the United States has given $24.4 billion to Ukraine, $11.3 billion to Israel, $1.95 billion to Ethiopia, $1.6 billion to Jordan, $1.4 billion to Egypt, $1.1 billion to Afghanistan, $1.2 billion to Somalia, $1 billion to Yemen, $987 million to Congo, $896 million to Syria, and $9,000 per illegal immigrant who also receives free furnished housing for 2 years, cell phones, medical care, and so much more. I've provided the link to the SGT report titled "A Devastating Betrayal of America" that reveals so much more that we need to know. Clearly, people, the government, the illegitimate government, is weaponized against us. Considering the efforts by Senator John Kerry and Governor Newsom, among others, to stop the truth from being told, the fact that FEMA created a rumor control page is proof enough to me that what is being told over podcasts like this and social media is the truth. If you didn't know, President Trump actually established a GoFundMe page for our fellow Americans who are being denied FEMA assistance. There are other trustworthy places you can give through too, but as we've been repeatedly warned, make certain you give to proven groups that without question will see that the funds are converted to actual and maximum relief for the victims, and understand the help will be needed for an extended period of time. Intercessors for America wrote local pastor Nathan Hawkins serves Trinity Baptist Church located in the heart of Asheville. The church has been hosting 6 National Guard Task Force units, providing food and a place to sleep in the church's sanctuary and students' buildings. He asked us to pray for Asheville, which has been changed forever. Quote, "Some communities have been wiped away. It could take months to pick up and recover. We are taking it an hour at a time. To see the church stepping up is an answer to prayer. Pray for the community churches and staff. They work 24/7. The response from churches has been overwhelming. North, South Carolina, and Tennessee churches are working to help the community," Pastor Nathan said. I encourage you to please read the Intercessors for America article to have a better understanding of what's actually going on for these precious people. As I said early on, all the civil unrest, wars, devastating events, the chokehold on our economy, our jobs and health care, and more are the intentional efforts against the people of the world, specifically God's people. This evil cabal has sought systematically to change America in part by opening our borders and providing for the illegals to garner their votes in this most critical of all United States elections. The fact that they are given a vote, the fact that voter ID is not required, the expansion of mail-in ballots, and the days that votes can be cast, all of this is the cabal's attempt to secure their power. So I wrote all of this for my podcast to this point. Then I decided I would listen to the daily word from God through Julie Green for today, which is October 8th. She received a word from God on October 5th, and in that word he addressed not only Hurricane Helene and FEMA, but also Maui, and he warns us to brace for more. We know Hurricane Milton is coming, but God addressed events that will also occur in other nations. You want to hear what God has said, so you can be prepared wherever you live and be encouraged, because God clearly stated Judgment Day for the one world government is imminent, which means all the nations of the world will be impacted. Please use the link in the show notes. God has confirmed all of the wicked turmoil in the world is the work of the enemy of God to gain world control. Satan is working through people who are power, money, and control driven. From our natural point of view, the United States 2024 election, and not just that of the president, but all seats that are open for election, are key in what happens in the world. This is not an overstatement. If you are in the United States, get informed and vote for all the seats that are open. If Donald Trump won presidency, but the House and Senate were majority Democrat, or better stated, anti-America, he could not accomplish what the world needs. However, from a spiritual point of view, God has told us what we can do to partner with him and see him work in our behalf. God has also clearly said he does not need man's election to do what he has planned. Most definitely, God can bypass any man-made system. At the same time, we have the duty as Americans to be the governing authority over our elected officials. As a constitutional republic, we vote for people to represent us, to represent our values and ideals. The Bible clearly states, to whom much is given, much will be required. So anyone given the opportunity to vote in this constitutional republic, even if evil people will try to steal the election, we must vote knowing we will have to give an account for ourselves before God. I remind you, it's no coincidence that these events occur around the high Jewish holy days. Please make good use of the remaining days of the 10 days of awe that lead up to Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, which is October 12th. Will this be the day we see God's miraculous intervention? I don't know, but we must be prepared either way. Use these days until then to somberly go before the Lord, asking him to reveal what needs to be repented of in your life, that you may be prepared and ready for the promotion or advancement he wants to give you. I'm interviewing Amanda Grace on the 10th, so I'm pleased to say she will be my guest for you next week. Now I ask you to listen to my announcements and take advantage of the many goods and services I bring you in an effort to at least help me cover the costs of this podcast. It may seem far off, but most people make plans for a significant vacation about a year in advance. So if you haven't already expressed interest in traveling with us in October 2025, now is the time to do so. We want to have about 30 people total because this size group works best for the specific tour I have in mind. We'll be walking the footsteps of the Apostle Paul. I'm using the time between now and February 2025 to determine if we have enough interest, and the trend indicates we definitely should. We have just about 30 people on the list now, but I'd like to have more because when it comes to the actual day of making a commitment, things could have changed, and I want to be able to have at least 30 actually attend the tour. So, if you think you'd like to be part of the Faith to Live By Christian tour with me in Greece during October 2025, now is the time to get your name and number in your party on the list. There's no obligation at this point. You're just expressing your interest. While the specific details are subject to change, as it stands now, the week-long tour will include 4 nights at Divani Palace Acropolis Hotel in Athens, which includes breakfast, 1 night at Amelia Hotel in Delphi, which includes breakfast, 1 night at Grand Meteora Hotel in Kalambaka with breakfast, 2 nights at Mediterranean Palace Hotel in Thessaloniki, that includes breakfast, 2 dinners at local restaurants, tour guide throughout, deluxe coach throughout, admissions to museums and sites, tips to guides, drivers, and restaurants, and all local taxes. Estimated cost per person double occupancy room is about $3,000. Attendees need to arrange their own air travel to and from the Athens International Airport. To get your name on the list, send an email to faithtoliveby@PamelaChristianMinistries.com with the word Greece in the subject line. In the body of the email, provide your name, contact information, and number of people you expect to be in your party. This will place your name on the interested in attending list, but does not obligate you in any way. It merely assures you have first right of refusal come February 2025 when down payments are due. If you didn't get the details written down that I just shared, simply visit my Beyond the Podcast page using the link in the show notes. If you like what you hear from me with this podcast, I highly recommend my book series, my award-winning blog, and consider signing up for my certificate course in apologetics. My aim with that course is to help people learn how not only to use apologetics to share truth with others, but to help Christian leaders incorporate apologetics into their respective ministries so more Christians are learning how to share their faith. You can learn more by using the link in the show notes. For now, I offer my weekly podcasts, my blog, and bi-monthly e-newsletter at no cost. And certainly I have hard costs associated with doing all I do. If you've been blessed by my work and would like to help my work reach others, why not consider partnering with me? For as little as $10 a month, you can become a partner. Then together we can reach even more people for Jesus. Simply visit my Pamela Christian Ministries homepage and then click on the Give button at the top menu bar. Or if you prefer, you can go directly to the Give page using the link in the show notes. To become a partner, you can use my PayPal or Venmo account, but you will also see other ways you can support my work on that page. Whether you choose to become a monthly partner, give a one-time donation, purchase my books and products from my web store, or support my affiliate sponsors, anything you can do to help me continue this work would be greatly appreciated. And as always, your prayers and telling others about me and my ministry work is much needed. When it comes to my selection of affiliate sponsors, I first look for Christian-owned and operated businesses, and I make a point of personally using the products or services so I can fully endorse them. I seek sponsors that offer products or services you can get via the internet worldwide, and I specifically consider what is common to most people universally. So you'll find health, beauty, and wellness products through Dr. Zelenko's Z-Stack supplements and from Operation Tomahawk and from QE Strong. Dr. Zelenko's Z-Stack supplements are truly amazing and are available to my listeners for a 5% discount per purchase or a 10% discount for a monthly subscription using the promo code FTLB. Operation Tomahawk is a membership purchase program with an American-owned and operated company offering personal and household care products that are not made of toxins or genetically modified ingredients. Stop buying national brands from corporations that are part of the deep state cabal. Use the link in the show notes, and from the drop-down menu under How Did You Hear About Us, select Pamela Christian, Faith to Live By. You may have heard my interview with Rob Renee about QE Strong. Discover the benefits of quantum energy to overcome all sorts of ailments. Visit QEstrong.com and use the promo code FTLB at checkout to receive your discount. Then, my newest affiliate I'm really excited to bring you is Q Streaming. That's CUE Streaming Television. People with United States addresses can get over 3,000 channels, including live TV with streaming television without a contract. Get all of your local networks and favorite movie and sports and pay-per-view channels for about half of what cable costs. See the video promo link in the show notes to learn more. Affiliate sponsors only provide financial support to me when you purchase what they offer. So before you support Amazon or any other retailer, if I offer what you're looking for, please purchase through me. When it comes to special occasions, birthdays, or Christmas gifts, consider my books, jewelry, CDs, and more from my web store or any of the affiliate goods and services I offer. When you purchase from my web store, be sure to use the promo code TRUTH, TRUTH, to receive a 20% discount. Again, you'll find all the links in the show notes. If you like the content and resource material I bring you with this podcast, you'll find much more by connecting with me through my blog. In fact, my blog has been awarded 2 unsolicited awards for Christian content. And I'm also very active on social media. I can cover much more on social media than I can with this weekly podcast. And if you're not already subscribed, please subscribe to my complimentary bi-monthly e-newsletter. I offer encouragement, special offers, and one of my signature recipes with each and every edition. Yep, I'm a foodie and I love to entertain, which is why Faith, Family, Friends, and Food is a bonus segment of my bi-monthly e-newsletter. To receive even more, please be sure to check out my dedicated podcast listeners page, Beyond the Podcast. Here's where we can connect exclusively and you can download complimentary devotionals, resources, and more. On that page, I also ask you to help me learn more about you and what you want by completing the form visible once you scroll down that page. And something that is very easy for you to do and would mean a lot to me is for you to rate, subscribe, or comment on this podcast according to what your preferred listening platform allows. You know how it works. The more likes and subscriptions to this podcast, the more opportunity we have to expand the listening audience. And that means we can reach more people with the gospel message of Jesus while helping people learn how to better apply their Christian faith. I hope you'll join me next week and tell your friends and family to listen right here on Faith to Live By, where we learn how to gain spiritual victory over life's issues. Until next week, I'm Pam Christian, asking you to remember Christ died for us. The least we can do is live for Him.